Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you the basics of the HTML document object model manipulation with JavaScript. We are going to review some of the most important concepts, including the key DOM properties and methods that will allow us to change different parts of our HTML page. With JavaScript, you can change all the elements and attributes within a page. You can also change all the CSS styles. You can remove or add new HTML elements and attributes. You can react to all existing HTML events in a page, such as the on-click of a button. And you can also create new HTML events within the page. As you may remember on a previous video on HTML crash course that I uploaded a few days ago, we've been reviewing this document object model where we have the root element that is the HTML tag, and then we have two childs, the head and the body, and then we have some other childs. For example, the body has the A tag and the H1 as childs. So the HTML DOM document object represents your web page. If you want to access any element within an HTML page, you always start with accessing the document object, and the document object is the root node of the HTML document. Before jumping into the different properties or the most important properties and methods that the HTML DOM API provides in order to manipulate the DOM, let's review what a property and a method are. So an HTML DOM property, it's a value that you can get or set that you can read or write, like changing the content of an HTML element. And an HTML DOM method, it's an action that you can do, like adding or deleting an HTML element. Some of the most important HTML DOM properties are the inner HTML property that gets or sets the HTML markup contained within an element, the children property that returns an array of all the child elements of the node upon which it was called, the ID property represents the element's unique identifier, and the class name property gets and sets the value of the class attribute of the specified element. And the name property gets or sets the name property of an element in the DOM. Some of the most important HTML DOM methods are getElementById, getElements by class name, querySelector, and querySelectorAll. GetElementById is a function that returns an HTML object representing the element whose ID property matches with the specified string. So to this function, you pass an ID as an argument, so it's going to return the HTML object that has that value in the ID property. The getElements by class name returns all child elements which have all of the given class names. You can pass as an argument one class name or multiple class names. And then we have the querySelector that returns the first element matching the specified group of selectors. We may pass as an argument one or more selectors, and the same happens with the querySelectorAll, but in this case does not return just one element, but a list of elements matching the specified group of selectors. Some other important HTML DOM methods are createElement to create a new HTML element, removeChild that removes an HTML element, appendChild that adds a new HTML element, and write that writes into the HTML output stream. So before jumping into the IDE and before start coding on JavaScript and HTML, I just wanted to review what the console log is. The console log will allow us to output a message or output different JavaScript objects to validate that the changes that we are doing on the DOM are working as we expect. We're going to use Chrome, so the console log will output these messages and JavaScript objects in the Chrome's debugging console. So let's jump to the IDE and let's start coding. Okay, we are going to be working on this HTML document. It's pretty basic. It only contains a paragraph, a couple of divs, and a button. And here I included a JavaScript file using this script tag, where you need to specify the type. That for JavaScript is going to be text/JavaScript, and the source, that's going to be the index.js, that is actually this file. It only contains the run function and is just doing some console.log of a constant text that is pragmaticreviews.com. By the way, remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Okay, so if we refresh this and we click on run, let me first open the debugging console of Chrome here. If you click on run, you're gonna see pragmaticreviews.com. Okay, so let's do something more interesting here, and let's change the text within this paragraph. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a constant that's gonna be actually the paragraph element. In order to access that paragraph, I'm going to use getElementById. So document.getElementById, and I'm going to copy and paste the elements identifier, that is P1 in this case. Once we have the element, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the inner HTML, and I'm going to assign a text here. That's going to be pragmaticreviews.com. So let's save this, let's refresh, and let's click on run. So we are still logging the same value, and if we inspect the HTML, we're going to see that the paragraph changed, the text of the paragraph actually changed to pragmaticreviews.com. So here we are using the getElementById method and the inner HTML property. Okay, now let's access this list of divs, and in order to do that, I'm going to use the, let me remove this. I'm going to use the getElementsByClass. So I'm going to define a constant as divs, and I'm going to use document.getElementsByClassName actually, and I'm going to copy and paste the class name of these two divs. And I'm going to log that array of elements. Remember that getElementsByClassName is going to return an array of the elements that has div class as the class name. Let's save this again, refresh, run. Okay, and now we have the two elements in the collection. We have the two divs, and as we can see, we have, for the first element, we have div1 text as the inner HTML, and for the second element, that is the second div, we have div2 text that are actually what we assign here in the document. Now let's change the text of the first div. let's replace div1 text by pragmaticreviews.com. So as any other collection in JavaScript, we can access the elements by the index in the array. So in this case, the index is 0, as we can see here on the right in the Chrome's debug console. So I'm going to access that element, and I'm going to change the inner HTML property. And I'm going to assign pragmaticreviews.com. That is actually the constant that we defined it here at the beginning of the function. Okay, I'm going to save, I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to click on run. And as you can see here, the text of the first div has been replaced by pragmaticreviews.com. We can also inspect that div, and as we can see, the text changed to pragmaticreviews.com. And if we go to the console, we can also see that the inner HTML property changed to pragmaticreviews.com. That's what we assigned it here. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to append a child to the first div. We're going to append a paragraph within the first div. So let's do some changes here. And in order to add this new paragraph, I'm going to create that node. And what I can use to do that is the createElement method from the DOM API. So I'm going to create a constant, name it paragraph, and I'm going to do document that create element, and as an argument I'm going to pass the tag name that for a paragraph is the tag p. Now I need to create a text node just to add some text within the paragraph, and I'm going to create a constant named text node, and I'm going to create that text node using the create text node method. So I want to use that one, create text node, and I'm going to pass pragmaticreviews.com as the content of that paragraph. And now I'm going to append the text node to the paragraph. So I'm going to enter paragraph that append child, and I'm going to pass the text node as the argument. And now I am going to grab the first div from the array, and I'm going to append the paragraph as the child. I'm going to save this, I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to run this function. And I'm going to inspect the first div, and we're going to see that the div includes the text that we already assigned to it, and also this new paragraph with pragmaticreviews.com as the text node within it. Okay, now let's make some changes here, and let's use query selector all. The result in this case should be the same, because with query selector all, we also get an array of elements. We need to change the argument, because in this case, we need to use the selector that we use, for example, when we define a CSS selector. So that's why I need to add a period before the class name. So I'm going to save this, I'm going to refresh, and we should get the same result. I'm going to inspect the first div, and we have the text, and we also have the paragraph that we created here. And I'm going to use query selector. The difference between query selector and query selector all is that query selector returns just one element, the first element that matches with this argument that has the div class as the value of the class attribute, and query selector all returns a collection with all the elements that match that argument. So in this case, I'm going to rename this constant by div because it's going to be a single element. Here I'm going to keep just the div to append the paragraph, and here I'm going to change the log, and I'm going to refresh this. I'm going to save this again. I'm going to refresh this. I'm going to run this function, and we should get the same effect. We have the text and we have the paragraph. Let's change the text just to validate that what we are doing is actually changing. So I'm going to refresh this. I'm going to run again. And as you can see, we have the text that we assigned at the very beginning. And we also have the paragraph with the new text that we just changed. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the children property of the div to see that we only have one child. That's going to be this paragraph that includes this text. So I'm going to remove this text just to be sure that we only have one element as the child. So I'm going to log the children attribute of the div. So let's refresh this. Let's go to the console, first run the function. And as we can see, we only have one element, that's the paragraph, and it has the pragmatic reviews.com2 as the inner HTML. Okay, now I'm going to rename this function, add new child, and I'm going to create a new function, and I'm going to name it remove last child. I'm going to get the div here. I'm going to access the paragraph. So I'm going to create a new constant paragraph equals div dot children dot 0. That's going to be the only element. And this function depends on executing the first one. And what we are going to do is we're going to remove the paragraph by using the remove child method. And I'm going to pass the paragraph as the argument. And we're going to use console log to see that I removed the children from the div. Okay, and I'm going to rename, I'm going to change actually the name of the function here. I'm going to change the label of the button, add new child, and I'm going to create a new button, remove last child, and I'm going to invoke from here the new function named remove last child. I'm going to save this. I'm going to save the JavaScript file. I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to click on add new child. And as we can see, we have the new paragraph created. And I'm going to remove the last child. So if I click on remove last child, now I have the children collection empty. I'm going to clear this and execute it again just to double check. So I'm going to add a new child. That's going to add the paragraph to the div. And I'm going to remove it now. And now we can see that it's not longer a child of the div. Okay, so now you have some of the most important JavaScript and DOM fundamentals in order to be able to modify the contents of your HTML pages dynamically. This is Enrique with pragmaticreviews.com signing off. Remember to subscribe to the channel, and I see you guys later. Take care. Bye.